The starborn fleet, towering above Earth like a blackened sky, unleashed its fury. A wave of death descended upon the planet, their ships shimmering with alien energy. Plasma bolts and antimatter warheads exploded in the sky, obliterating cities in an instant. Humanity, once confident in its technological prowess, found itself helpless against this unstoppable force. In the heart of Washington, D.C., President Kate Calder watched the devastation unfold on holographic screens in the underground command center. Her face, usually the picture of diplomacy, now wore the deep creases of a woman at war. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table as she surveyed the reports of Earth's defenses collapsing, one city at a time. "We can't hold them off, Madam President," General Marcus Haynes said, his voice strained. "Their fleet is too vast. Our forces are outmatched. We need something we don't have, something we've never had." "And what would that be?" Calder snapped, her eyes narrowing. "A weapon," Haynes said. "A weapon of legends." At that moment, a low hum emanated from the darkened corner of the room, drawing everyone's attention. It was an encrypted signal, a message that had been intercepted just hours before the first Starbound ships arrived. The message was ancient, older than anything they'd ever encountered, but the data inside it was clear: coordinates, blueprints, and a single name. The last Starforge. The term sounded like a myth, a fable. There were stories, legends of a device capable of shaping the future itself. Some thought it was a creation of the forgotten alien race known as the Lyranth, long extinct after their war with the Starborn. But no one knew where the Starforge was, or if it even existed. Calder's eyes flicked to the map that now illuminated the central screen. The coordinates indicated a long-forgotten space station, the Forge Citadel, on the farthest edge of known space. The map showed its location inside a dense nebula, far from any habitable planet, hidden in a cloud of debris and cosmic radiation. If it was real, it was Earth's only hope. "General, I need every ship we can muster," Calder ordered, her voice cold and decisive. "We're going to find this Starforge, no matter the cost." Marcus Haynes hesitated but then nodded. "Aye, ma'am, but we're not the only ones looking for it." Calder's heart sank. If the Starborn knew of the Starforge's existence, they would stop at nothing to prevent humanity from using it. "Get me the fleet," Calder said, our resolve solidifying. "We leave now." Across the globe, resistance forces began assembling. At the front lines of Earth's last defense, Captain Sarah Riker, a battle-hardened officer with a reputation for boldness, received the order. Her flagship, the Valhalla, would be the one leading the expedition to the Forge Citadel. Alongside her, a hand-picked team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists would venture into the unknown. But Riker knew this mission was unlike any they had faced before. The enemy wasn't just a threat to Earth, it was a threat to all of humanity's future. And if they failed to reach the Starforge first, it might mean the end of everything. As she looked at the star maps, Riker's grip tightened on the armrest of her command chair. The Starborn might have the advantage in firepower, but humanity had something they didn't: hope. And no alien force, no matter how advanced, could ever crush that. "We won't just survive this, Captain. We'll win," Riker muttered to herself, staring out at the stars. She knew, deep down, that the fate of the human race rested on the next few days. The journey to the Forge Citadel would take them through uncharted space, filled with dangers no one could predict. But Sarah Riker was ready. They had no other choice but to succeed. Captain Sarah Riker stood at the command deck of the Valhalla, her eyes fixed on the star maps flickering across the holographic display. They were deep into enemy territory now, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the galaxy, where no ship had dared venture for centuries. Her mind raced through the mission objectives. They had to reach the Forge Citadel, hidden within the heart of Noxus Nebula, a region notorious for its treacherous radiation fields and gravitational anomalies. But with the Starbound fleet closing in, there was no time to waste. "Status report, Lieutenant," Riker called out, her voice sharp and focused. Lieutenant Jacobson, a young but exceptionally talented navigator, turned from his station. "We're approaching the nebula's edge, Captain. Radiation levels are spiking. It'll be a rough ride through the core, but we can make it. The Forge Citadel should be just beyond the radiation's reach." Riker nodded, but her gaze remained steely. She had known the risks since the moment they received the order. "Keep the shields at maximum. We don't know what's waiting for us in there." "Understood," Jacobson replied. Just then, the communications officer, Lieutenant Morales, spoke up, her voice tense. "Captain, we've got a priority signal. Incoming from Earth. It's encrypted." Riker's brow furrowed as she approached the comms console. "Patch it through." A moment later, the holographic image of President Calder appeared, looking more harried than usual. "Captain Riker, I don't have much time. We've intercepted Starbound communications. They know you're coming. They've already begun to deploy advanced drones around the nebula's core. You'll have company." Riker's pulse quickened. The Starbound were relentless. They weren't just going to let humanity find the Starforge. They were going to make sure it stayed buried, whatever the cost. "We're prepared for that, Madam President," Riker replied, her tone unwavering. "We'll push through." Calder's image flickered, a grave expression replacing her usual calm. "Be careful, Captain. You're not just going in to retrieve a weapon. The Starforge is dangerous. It's more than just a tool of war. We've uncovered ancient records for the Luranth archives. It's sentient. It may respond to its wielders, but not in ways we expect. The moment you activate it, everything could change. You must be ready." Riker's mind raced. Sentient. A weapon that could think, adapt, and possibly manipulate its wielder. The stakes were even higher than they'd realized. "Understood, Madam President. We'll be ready," Riker replied, cutting the transmission. She turned to her crew, her voice calm but intense. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We've got drones incoming. They'll be in range within the hour." As Riker gave her orders, the sound of approaching Starbound drones echoed through the Valhalla's hull. The smaller, stealthy craft were designed for high-speed pursuit, and they could disable ships with ease. The crew scrambled to their stations, and Riker felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. This was what they had trained for. They had no choice but to fight. The first drone appeared on the sensors. A streak of blue light shot through space, its engines flaring as it maneuvered toward them. It was only the first of many, and Riker knew they couldn't afford to waste time. The Starbound were already one step ahead, and their relentless pursuit was about to begin in earnest. "Take evasive action. Full power to engines." Riker barked. The Valhalla jerked to the side as the drone unleashed a torrent of laser fire, narrowly missing their shields. Riker's knuckles whitened around the armrest of her chair. This was just a taste of the horrors that lay ahead. "Shields holding at 70%, Captain," reported Ensign Yu, her voice calm, but laced with the tension of battle. "Another drone incoming, more in the distance. They're circling us." Riker gritted her teeth. "We can't keep outrunning them forever. We need to get into the nebula's core. Fast." As the ship veered toward the glowing maw of the nebula, The radiation intensified, making the sensors flicker and the lights in the command deck dim. The drones followed closely behind, refusing to let their prey escape. We're entering the nebula now. Radiation levels are off the charts, Jacobson said, his hands flying over the navigation controls. We'll lose them in here, but it's going to get even rougher. Riker nodded, gripping her chair as the ship shook under the assault. Hold on tight. Once we're through, it's a straight shot to the Forge Citadel. But even as the Valhalla plunged into the heart of the nebula, Riker couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just racing toward the Starforge. They were racing towards something far more dangerous, something they couldn't yet understand. The Starforge was waking up, and it wasn't ready for them. Or was it? The Valhalla groaned as it entered the core of the heart of Noxus Nebula, the ship's shields flaring against the unrelenting radiation storm. The dense clouds of ionized gas created a kaleidoscope of colors around them, a chaotic maelstrom of light and shadow. Riker could feel the strain in every inch of the ship as it navigated through the nebula's volatile currents, every moment a fight for survival. All systems functioning within operational limits, Captain, Lieutenant Jacobson reported, his voice laced with tension. But we're going to lose long-range communications soon. The nebula's interference is already messing with the signal. We don't need long-range comms, Riker replied, her eyes locked on the swirling maelstrom ahead. We just need to reach the Forge Citadel. Hold steady, everyone. The crew braced themselves as the ship surged forward. Distant blips appeared on the radar, a swarm of Starbound drones closing in. Despite the nebula's disorienting nature, the drones seemed to be able to track them with unnatural precision. Drones closing in fast, Captain, reported Ensign Yu, her voice tight with urgency. They're not far behind. We won't be able to outrun them in this chaos. Not outrun, Riker muttered, her lips curling into a grim smile. We fight. She slammed a fist onto the comms console, activating the tactical display. The Starbound drones were closing in at lightning speed, their sleek, metallic forms cutting through the nebula's gas clouds like predators hunting prey. They weren't just any drones. They were equipped with advanced cloaking devices, rendering them nearly invisible to the naked eye. But the Valhalla had systems in place to detect even the most advanced stealth technology. Prep the weapons. We need to make this count, Riker ordered. The drone swarm was relentless, firing blinding blue energy bolts that rained down on the Valhalla, crackling across the shields and rattling the hull. Riker's crew scrambled into action, their training kicking in. In moments, the ship's heavy plasma cannons hummed to life, targeting the incoming drones. Firing. Lieutenant Jacobson shouted. The Valhalla rocked as a barrage of plasma beams shot out into the swirling mist. One drone disintegrated in a flash of violet energy, its remnants scattering into the cosmic wind. Another was hit, but it swerved away, still alive and firing back with pinpoint accuracy. Shields holding at 50%, Captain, Ensign Yu reported, her eyes wide with fear. We can't keep this up for long. We won't have to, Riker said, narrowing her eyes at the tactical display. They're not here to fight. They're here to slow us down. The realization hit her with a cold wave. The drones weren't just after them. They were trying to herd them, to trap them. Jacobson, increase speed. Take us deeper into the nebula. Full power to the engines. Without hesitation, Jacobson punched in the commands. The Valhalla surged forward, the drones hot on their tail, but their attacks were becoming less effective. The nebula was playing tricks on their sensors, distorting the images, causing the drones to misfire and miss their targets. Riker's strategy was simple: push deeper into the chaos, forcing the drones to fight through the same interference that was disorienting them. "We're losing the drones, Captain," Jacobson said with a hint of relief. "They're having trouble navigating the nebula's core." "Good," Riker muttered. "Let's make sure it stays that way. Get ready to engage the main engines. Prepare for a sharp course change." As the Valhalla dove deeper into the nebula, the crew could see it, just ahead, barely visible through the haze of ionized gas, was the Forge Citadel. It was an ancient structure, a massive, sprawling space station, suspended in the center of the nebula like a long-abandoned relic from a forgotten war. The design was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered: massive, smooth curves and angular spires that seemed to defy the laws of physics, radiating an eerie, pulsating energy. The Starforge's power was palpable, even from a distance. "We found it," Riker whispered under her breath. But there was no time to celebrate. As the Valhalla neared the Citadel, they noticed something disturbing. The station wasn't abandoned. A new fleet of Starbound drones, even larger and more menacing, surrounded it. It was a trap, waiting for them, lying in wait like a predator circling its prey. "Captain, they're not going to let us near the Forge without a fight," Lieutenant Jacobson warned. Riker's mind raced. They had come this far, faced impossible odds, and now the Starborn were waiting to crush them at the very doorstep of victory. The Starforge, the weapon that could change the fate of the galaxy, was within reach, but the cost of claiming it might be more than any of them could pay. "We'll have to fight our way in," Riker said, her jaw set in determination. "Prepare for immediate combat. This is it, for Earth and for humanity." As the Valhalla descended toward the Forge Citadel, the drone swarm surged forward, blocking their path. Riker's crew braced for the coming battle, their hearts pounding with the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy depended on the outcome of this moment. There was no turning back. The weapon was within reach, and the Starborn were determined to stop them, at all costs. The Valhalla shuddered as it neared the Forge Citadel, its once gleaming surface now battered from the barrage of Starborn drones. Despite their evasive maneuvers and the chaos of the nebula surrounding them, the relentless attack continued. The drones were circling in, each one a harbinger of destruction. Riker's heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the command chair, her mind racing. "Captain, we've entered the outer perimeter of the Forge Citadel's defensive field," Lieutenant Jacobson reported, eyes glued to the controls. "We're being pulled into a gravitational lock. No way to break free without significant damage." "Great," Riker muttered, fingers drumming against the armrest. "What's our best option?" "One of the secondary docking bays is open. It's unguarded." Jacobson paused as his eyes flickered to the tactical display. "But we'll have to break through the Starborn blockade first." Ensign Yu, her fingers flying over her console, chimed in. "We've got more drones incoming, 50, maybe more. And I'm detecting Starborn warships too. This is their stronghold." Riker stared at the screen, where the towering silhouettes of the Starborn ships began to emerge from the nebulous haze, like spectral leviathans lurking in the shadows. Massive capital ships, their surfaces gleaming with strange, otherworldly metal. Every instinct told her to retreat, but she knew the cost of failure was too high. "We don't have the luxury of retreating," Riker said, her voice tight. "Prep the main guns and divert all auxiliary power to the shields. We'll punch through the blockade and take the chance on the docking bay." As the crew scrambled to their stations, Riker steeled herself for the inevitable battle ahead. They could not afford any more distractions. The Starforge was within their grasp, and the Starborn would stop at nothing to ensure they never activated it. "Captain, incoming message," Lieutenant Morales said from the comms station. "It's strange encrypted." Riker felt a chill run down her spine. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen wasn't from Earth. It was a pale figure, a strange alien, tall and imposing, draped in dark, flowing robes. Its eyes gleamed with an eerie, unnatural light, and its voice crackled as if coming from the depths of space itself. "Captain Sarah Riker." The alien's voice echoed, calm but heavy with malice. "I am Voraz, commander of the Starborn fleet. Your journey has come to an end." Riker's heart raced. She knew what this meant. The Starborn were trying to destabilize them before they even had a chance to get close to the Starforge. This was the voice of the enemy's leadership, and they weren't wasting any time. "We've come too far to be stopped by words, Voraz." Riker shot back, her voice cold with defiance. "We are taking the Starforge, and nothing you do will change that." Voraz's expression shifted, his lipless mouth curling into a grotesque, knowing smile. "You misunderstand, Captain. The Starforge is not simply a weapon. It is a relic of the Lyranth, an ancient power beyond comprehension. It does not merely respond to the touch of its users. It chooses its wielders. If you dare attempt to use it, you will not just awaken its power, you will awaken it." Riker froze, a sickening realization washing over her. The Starforge wasn't just a weapon. It was alive. Before she could respond, the transmission abruptly cut off. The alien's warning hung in the air like a dark omen, chilling her to the bone. The crew was silent for a moment, the weight of the message settling in. "Captain," Ensign Yu started, her voice trembling. "Did he say what I think he said? The Starforge chooses." "I heard it," Riker replied, her voice steady despite the unease creeping in. "And we're about to find out what that really means." The looming shadow of the Starborn ships approached, and the distant hum of energy weapons powered up. Riker stood and faced her crew, her resolve hardening like steel. "We fight, and we take the Starforge, no matter the cost. Prepare for battle." With a final command, the Valhalla lurched forward, breaking through the nebula's outer rim as the enemy's warships closed in. Riker knew they were heading straight into the heart of the storm. The Starforge was near. Its power was undeniable, but the threat it posed was just as real. The battle was inevitable. As the Valhalla surged toward the Forge citadel, the Starborn warships opened fire, their beams of destructive energy lancing through the nebula. Riker's instincts kicked in as she barked orders, the Valhalla weaving and swerving through the incoming blasts, plasma cannons firing in retaliation. "Target the lead ship. We take down their command vessel first," Riker shouted. The Valhalla rocked with the impact of a blast, but their retaliatory fire scored a direct hit on the lead Starborn vessel. The explosion lit up the dark void of space, a brief flare of violent light in the deep cosmic ocean. It wasn't enough to stop the entire fleet, but it bought them a few precious moments. "We're almost there," Riker muttered, staring at the distant silhouette of the Forge citadel. "Hold on." The Starborn fleet pressed in, determined to prevent the crew of the Valhalla from ever reaching their goal. But Riker wasn't about to let them win. They had come too far, and the legacy of the Starforge would be written by humanity, not the Starborn. They were about to awaken something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The Valhalla plunged deeper into the heart of the Forge citadel's orbit, its hull shuddering under the continuous barrage from the Starborn fleet. Riker's grip on the command chair tightened as she watched the flickering readings of their energy levels. The ship was taking damage, but the shields were holding for now. The crew's focus remained laser-sharp. There was no room for error. "Captain, we've breached the outer defense grid," Lieutenant Jacobson said, his voice laced with a mix of relief and anxiety. "We're clear to enter the docking bay." Locking onto the bay's coordinates now. The citadel loomed larger on the screen, an enormous structure that seemed to pulse with energy, an ancient forgotten sentinel from a time long past. Its surface glowed faintly, lines of light tracing the outline of its form, as if the station itself was alive. The closer they got, the more unsettling it became. Riker couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just entering a facility. They were entering the heart of something ancient, something that had been waiting. "Get us in there," Riker commanded. No. The Valhalla surged forward, dodging another salvo from a starborn warship, but the gravitational pull from the Forge citadel was intense. The ship's engines roared as they fought against the tide. The drones were still tailing them, relentless in their pursuit. "Captain, we're not going to make it to the bay if they keep pounding us like this," Ensign Yu called out from the weapons station. Riker's eyes flicked to the tactical display, where the drones were closing in, ready to launch their final wave. She knew they had seconds to make the decision. "Brace for impact," Riker said through gritted teeth. "We're making a run for it." "Incoming," Lieutenant Jacobson shouted. A starborn drone, too close for comfort, launched a barrage of missiles directly at the Valhalla. The explosion rocked the ship, sending shockwaves through the deck. The hull groaned, and for a moment it seemed as if the ship might break apart, but Riker held fast, her eyes locked on the docking bay ahead. "Power down auxiliary engines. Prepare for crash landing," Jacobson called. The Valhalla hit the outer rim of the docking bay with a deafening crash, skidding across the surface before grinding to a halt against the bay's reinforced bulkheads. The ship was damaged, but the crew had made it inside. Barely. "We're in," Riker muttered, exhaling sharply. "All hands, prepare for immediate exit. Let's move." Without hesitation, the crew sprang into action, grabbing their gear and moving swiftly to the airlocks. Riker took a final look at the bay's entrance, watching the starborn drone swirl outside the docking bay. They weren't finished yet, but for now they were safe inside the Forge citadel. The airlock doors hissed open, revealing an eerie, dimly lit corridor. The walls were covered in strange, ancient symbols that seemed to shimmer in the low light, shifting as if alive. The citadel's architecture was unlike anything Riker had seen, smooth, seamless, and monolithic. There were no visible doors or windows, just towering walls of what appeared to be a living metal. "This place feels wrong," Ensign Yu said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like it's breathing." Riker glanced at the crew, noting their unease, but she didn't allow herself the luxury of hesitation. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they had to reach the heart of this place, where the Starforge awaited. "Keep moving. We don't have time to waste," Riker ordered. The team made their way down the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the metallic floors. The deeper they ventured into the citadel, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It felt as though something was watching them, guiding them forward, or perhaps preventing them from leaving. The walls seemed to grow darker, and the air grew colder, a sense of dread thickening around them. Eventually, they reached a massive chamber at the center of the station. The size of the room was beyond anything they had imagined, stretching out into the darkness with walls that appeared to vanish into infinity. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal of shimmering, iridescent metal, was the Starforge. It pulsed with an eerie light, its surface a dark, shifting void that seemed to swallow all light around it. The weapon, or whatever it was alive, and it radiated power. Riker's breath caught in her throat as she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the weapon that could end the war, but something about the Starforge unsettled her. It wasn't just an object, it was a presence, like a living thing waiting to be awakened. "Captain," Lieutenant Jacobson's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are we sure we want to activate this thing? We still don't know what it really does." Riker hesitated, looking at the weapon. She knew what they had to do. The Starforge had the power to change the course of the war, but at what cost? "We don't have a choice," she said, voice steady. "Activate it. We need to use it now." The team gathered around the pedestal, each of them instinctively reaching out toward the weapon, but as their fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of energy flared from the Starforge. It shuddered as if awakening from a deep slumber. The room grew colder, and the air hummed with an intense, almost unbearable energy. Riker's eyes widened as the Starforge's core seemed to open, revealing something more, a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend around it. And then a voice, ancient and powerful, echoed in her mind. "You seek power, but can you control it?" Riker froze, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. The Starforge wasn't just responding, it was speaking to them. "Only those worthy may wield me. Are you worthy, Captain Riker?" Her hands trembled, but she didn't pull away. The fate of humanity depended on what came next. She had to make the choice. The weapon could save them, or doom them all. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We are worthy." And then, with a burst of energy, the Starforge activated, its power surging through the room. The world around them began to unravel, and Riker realized, too late, that they had just crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The moment Riker's words echoed through the chamber, a shockwave of energy blasted outward from the Starforge. The floor beneath them trembled, and a violent surge of light erupted from the core of the weapon, sending the crew reeling back. For a moment, the room itself seemed to disappear, as if the very fabric of space had been torn apart. Riker's vision blurred, her head spinning from the overwhelming power that radiated from the Starforge. It felt like the entire universe had bent, warped by the presence of the ancient relic. Her body felt weightless, as though she was no longer standing on solid ground, but suspended in a vast void. The walls of the citadel stretched and contorted, melting into the swirling vortex at the center of the room. The Starforge pulsed, its energy churning and twisting, as though responding to the very essence of their being. And then the voice came again, its power like a thunderclap in Riker's mind. "You have awoken me, Captain Riker, but this is only the beginning. What you seek is not power, it is fate. The path you now walk is not one of victory, but of judgment." Riker's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the pedestal for support, but the energy pouring from the Starforge was too overwhelming. It felt like a storm inside her mind, like the weight of an ancient civilization's knowledge and power crashing over her. She felt herself slipping, her consciousness flickering in and out of focus as the Starforge's voice filled her head. "The power to reshape the galaxy is yours, but the price of wielding me is not one that can be easily paid. Every choice you make will have consequences. Every use of my power will change you. And when you strike, the ripples will reach further than you can imagine. Captain." Jacobson's voice broke through the fog in her mind. He was shouting her name, but it sounded distant, muffled by the deafening hum of the Starforge's energy. His hand gripped her arm, but it felt like it was coming from far away. Riker, you have to snap out of it. With an effort of will, Riker fought against the overwhelming surge of power. She blinked hard, trying to clear the fog in her mind. The voice in her head quieted, but the sense of dread remained. Slowly, she gathered her strength and forced herself to focus. "I'm fine," she said, her voice strained, but resolute. "Get a read on the systems. How is the Forge reacting?" Ensign Yu, still trembling from the sheer force of the energy wave, checked her console. It's overwhelming the systems, Captain. But the Forge is opening. There's something in there, something more. It's not just a weapon. It's like it's calling to us. Riker's heart sank as she realized that the Starforge was not just a machine. It was a doorway, a gateway to something far greater and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "We need to get to the core," Riker said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Now, move out." The team rushed forward, navigating the shifting, distorted corridors of the Citadel as it began to warp and change around them. The walls flickered in and out of existence, like the station itself was being torn apart and reassembled. Their paths seemed to twist in impossible directions, as though they were moving through a living nightmare. As they neared the center of the Citadel, the air grew thick with a strange energy. The light from the Starforge seemed to pulse through the walls, casting strange, elongated shadows across the vast, cavernous space. It felt as though they were walking deeper into the heart of a cosmic storm. Every step felt heavier, like the weight of the entire galaxy was pressing down on them. And then they saw it. At the center of the Citadel, surrounded by an aura of dark, swirling energy, was the true core of the Starforge. It was unlike anything Riker had ever seen, a massive crystalline structure that seemed to grow and change before their eyes. It shimmered with an inner light, as though it was alive, a living embodiment of the weapon's power. But what struck Riker the most was the strange, incomprehensible pattern etched into its surface, like a map, but one that seemed to stretch across dimensions, its lines twisting and interlocking in ways that defied understanding. "This is it," Lieutenant Jacobson whispered, his voice filled with awe. "The core, the heart of the Starforge." The crew stood still for a moment, taking in the impossible structure before them. Riker's mind raced, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of what they had discovered. The Starforge was not just a weapon. It was a gateway to something far more ancient and powerful than any of them could fathom. "To wield me is to unlock the universe's hidden truths," the voice returned, softer now, but no less chilling. "But the truths you seek will not come without sacrifice. You will be tested. Your humanity will be your greatest challenge." Riker turned to her crew, her resolve hardening. She had come too far to turn back now. The fate of humanity rested on the Starforge's power, but at what cost? "We move forward," Riker said, her voice unwavering. "We came here to end this war. Whatever it takes, we use the Forge to fight back. For Earth, and for everyone we've lost." With those words, they approached the heart of the Starforge. The moment they touched its surface, the entire Citadel seemed to tremble, and the vortex of energy surrounding them intensified. The weapon, the doorway, the key to the galaxy's fate was about to unlock. But they would soon learn that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. The true test had only just begun. The instant Riker's hand touched the crystalline core of the Starforge, the world around them seemed to dissolve. A blinding light erupted from the center of the core, flooding the entire chamber. The air grew thick with the pulse of ancient energy, and the walls of the Citadel reverberated with an eerie hum, like the thrum of a heartbeat far older than anything in the galaxy. Riker felt her mind stretch, pulled in 1,000 directions at once, as though the Starforge was searching, probing, testing her very essence. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she thought she was falling. But when her senses returned, she was no longer standing in the chamber. She was somewhere else, somewhere vast, infinite, and cold. The stars flickered in the distance, dim and distant, like the forgotten embers of an ancient fire. She was floating in the void, and around her shadowy figures began to materialize, beings of immense power, their forms shifting and flickering like smoke. "So, you seek the power of the Forge, Captain Riker." A voice rang out in her mind. It was low, resonant, filled with both ancient wisdom and chilling authority. Riker's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the Starforge itself, not as an object, but as an entity, alive, aware, watching. She tried to speak, but her voice didn't come. Instead, the voice in her head continued. "You are worthy to stand in the presence of the Forge. But remember, power comes at a price. The very fabric of existence trembles at your will. If you strike, there will be no turning back." Riker's breath quickened. She felt herself being drawn closer to the entities that surrounded her, their forms becoming more defined with each passing second. They were no longer figures in the void. They were beings of unimaginable energy, creatures whose presence threatened to unmake the universe itself. "You," Riker whispered, the words escaping her lips before she could stop them. "What are you? Are you the creators of the Forge?" "We are the Lyranth," the voice answered, sending a ripple of dread through her. "We built the Starforge. We are its architects, its custodians, its keepers. We shaped its power to create, but we also shaped it to destroy. And now you will decide how the Forge's legacy will unfold." The figures moved closer, their forms now clear and sharp. Tall, humanoid beings, their skin rippling with iridescent light. They radiated an unnatural energy, like the core of a dying star. Their eyes glowed with a strange, otherworldly light, and their gaze fixed on Riker, piercing and eternal. "You wish to end the war, Captain, but be warned. The Starforge does not obey those who seek to control it. It tests those who would wield it. Only the most deserving may command its full power, and the path of the deserving is never a simple one." The words hit Riker like a physical blow. She had known the Starforge was dangerous, but she had never imagined it was a sentient being, something far older and more complex than she could ever fathom. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a force of nature itself, a tool of creation and destruction that had shaped the destiny of galaxies. The Lyranth's gaze intensified, and Riker felt a wave of fear wash over her. The power they offered was irresistible, but it was also more than she could ever hope to control. There was no guarantee that they would let her wield it for humanity's sake. The price of using the Starforge might be far higher than she was willing to pay. To unlock the Forge's true power, the Lyranth's voice echoed, "You must first prove your worth. If you fail, the consequences will be dire. The power you seek will turn against you. You will become a tool of destruction, a puppet of fate." Riker's mind raced, her thoughts fragmented by the enormity of the choice before her. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. The war against the Starborn had raged for too long, and this was their only chance to end it. But the power of the Starforge came with an impossible burden, a burden that threatened not just her, but everything she held dear. "Choose wisely," the Lyranth intoned, their voices resonating through the void. "The Starforge will reshape the universe, but it will also reshape you. Can you bear the weight of its power?" Riker gritted her teeth, trying to focus despite the overwhelming pressure. She couldn't back down. Not now. They had fought too hard. lost too much to turn away now. The Starforge was humanity's last hope, and she had come this far. If she had to risk everything to end the war and protect her people, then that was a price she would have to pay. "We have no choice," Riker said, her voice steady, even as doubt gnawed at her insides. "I choose to wield the Starforge. For Earth, for my crew, for every life lost in this war." For a moment, the Lyranth were silent. Then the void around her began to shift, the stars flickering as the immense power of the forge began to surge through her, filling her with an overwhelming sense of purpose and a deep, terrifying knowledge of the cost. She felt herself change, her very being becoming entwined with the Starforge's essence. Its power flowed through her, and with it came the knowledge that she was no longer just a human. She was something else, something far beyond the reach of any mortal. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the vision faded. Riker's senses snapped back to reality, and she was standing in the Citadel once more, her hand still on the core of the Starforge. The chamber around her was quiet. Her crew stood frozen, watching her with wide eyes. Riker took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She could feel the power of the Starforge inside her, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The voice of the Lyranth echoed one last time, this time soft, almost regretful. "You have chosen. Now the consequences begin." Riker knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever happened next would change everything. The galaxy would never be the same. Riker's vision cleared, and the Citadel's chamber returned to focus. The Starforge pulsed with a quiet, menacing hum, its energy saturating the air. Her crew stood at the ready, their expressions a mix of awe and apprehension. They knew that everything had just changed, that Riker, too, had changed. The weight of the Starforge's power surged within her, filling her mind with new visions, ancient knowledge, and a deep sense of responsibility that nearly crushed her. "Captain." Jacobson's voice cut through the heavy silence, his tone laced with concern. "Are you all right?" Riker blinked, pushing back the overwhelming sensations that threatened to drown her. She focused on her crew, forcing herself to regain control. "I'm fine," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "We're not out of this yet. The Starforge is awake, and now we have to use it." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but there was no time for hesitation. The starbound fleet was still on their tail, and every moment spent in the Citadel was another moment wasted. The battle was still raging across the stars, and humanity's survival hung by a thread. "We need to access the Forge's weaponry core," Riker continued, steeling herself. "Now that we've activated it, we have to make it work for us." Ensign Yu stepped forward, her fingers dancing over the console. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the Citadel's lower levels. It's like the entire station is converting its power into a singular weapon." Riker nodded grimly. "That's the Forge. It's been dormant for millennia, but now it's preparing for what it was made to do. We need to stop it from firing, before it can reach the starbound fleet." They moved quickly, following Yu's lead as she navigated through the twisting, labyrinthine corridors of the Citadel. The further they went, the more the station seemed to resist them, its walls flickering and changing, as if alive, as though it were a sentient being unwilling to let them reach the weapon's heart. "It's like the Citadel knows what we're trying to do," Jacobson muttered, his voice tight with frustration. The deeper they ventured, the more intense the atmosphere became. The walls pulsed, and the air grew thick with energy. Riker's chest tightened with each step as the Starforge's power amplified within her. She could feel the raw energy surging through her veins, a constant reminder that she had made an irreversible choice. She could sense the Forge's will, its ancient intelligence, pushing her toward a singular goal. But was it her goal, or was the Forge guiding her, using her? The team reached the central chamber where the heart of the weapon lay, a vast, open space filled with an enormous crystalline structure that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The air crackled with power, and Riker's senses screamed at her to stop, to resist. But she pushed forward. This was their only chance. "This is it," she said, her voice barely audible against the hum of the Forge. The weapon was ready. "We have to trigger it before it triggers itself." She approached the center of the chamber, where a massive control interface pulsed with light. The energy flowing through the citadel felt suffocating, but she steadied herself. She placed her hand on the console, feeling the energy flow from it and into her. The Starforge's power responded, swift, violent, and intoxicating. It surged through her, almost like a drug, pulling at her mind and soul, filling her with thoughts and visions of a future where humanity was the unquestioned ruler of the stars. But she resisted. This wasn't about domination. It wasn't about using the Starforge's power to control the galaxy. It was about survival. Humanity had endured for too long. They had fought and bled to stay alive, to protect the last remnants of their civilization. And Riker was willing to sacrifice everything to ensure they didn't lose it all now. As her hand made contact with the console, a shockwave of energy erupted through the chamber, the Starforge's weapon power activating. She could feel the entire citadel shaking, the sheer force of the weapon building to an unimaginable crescendo. "Captain, get away from the console." You shouted, her voice filled with urgency. But it was too late. A blinding light erupted from the heart of the Starforge, blasting through the citadel and cutting through space itself. Riker was thrown back, her body slamming into the floor, the force of the explosion overwhelming her. The room around her spun wildly as the energy surged out, tearing through the structure of the citadel, creating shockwaves that reached out into the void. And then silence. The light faded, and the sound of destruction was replaced by an eerie stillness. Riker, dazed and disoriented, pushed herself up, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind still echoed with the power of the Starforge, and she could feel it fading, the connection between them severing. "Captain," Jacobson said, voice shaking. "What happened?" Riker stumbled to her feet, staring at the now-dead core of the Starforge. The weapon had fired, yes, but the Starborn fleet was no longer a threat. They had seen it, the pulse of the Starforge's power, and they had withdrawn. The Starborn knew what it was capable of. They feared it. The war was over. But at what cost? Riker gazed at the remains of the Starforge. It had been used, and in doing so, it had shattered. The ancient weapon was no longer a tool of creation or destruction. It was nothing more than a broken relic, its power spent, its purpose fulfilled. But humanity had survived. "We won," Riker whispered, her voice hollow. "We survived." And yet, as the dust settled around them, Riker knew the truth. The Starforge had not just changed the course of the war. It had changed her and humanity forever. They had unlocked a power beyond their understanding, but the price had been steep. As the crew gathered around her, silent in the aftermath, Riker couldn't help but wonder what would come next. What did it mean to wield such power? What would be the cost of their victory in the long run? The answers to those questions were still out there, waiting to be discovered. But for now, humanity had won, and that would have to be enough. For now.